On the technology analysis part, the focus has been on the buzzwords of the day because it's a small company and it can afford to do that. So that means IoT, quantum computing, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and AI. If you think of any other hot things, let me know. But there are 3 or 4 people there who are deep and strong and have the background, and they can crank and gain what we call, insightful simplicity or simple insightfulness or something like that. So that's kind of my part. So along the way, I've kind of got to meet our panelists. Every one of them brings an incredibly important and unique and very apropos perspective to this. So I start with Andy Doe in the middle because he starts with the start of this whole thing. So he runs a company called Embedded Works. He and his team work with people who want to build connected things. And that means starting from scratch. What radio do I use? What chip do I use? What this do I use? What do, right? So they have that experience. And one of the reasons I kind of wanted vendor variety on the panel is because they have seen many different examples and they can bring the sum total of that experience forward and have the insights about what the challenges are, how people go around fixing them, solving them, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of the beginning of it. The middle part of it is Ben Gibbs. He runs a group called ACE, Afero Customer Enablement.
Yeah.
And his group is, they are total aces. They know everything about everything and are absolutely just wonderful to talk to. Because every time I talk to them, I learn something, and not something like trivial, something like really, oh my God, category. So Ben and his team work around the world with people who have kind of figured out that they want to do it. Do they have the right business case? Do they not? How do they actually implement it? How do they do management? So he kind of can cover that piece of it and the challenges of that. Dan Meyer, who I also have got to know, is the CMO of a company called Zingbox. He's probably busier than all of us right now because their company is just being acquired by Palo Alto Networks. Obviously, a great vote of confidence about the technology that these guys have built and delivered to the market. He and his company work on the other side of the thing. So now there is a connected device, and many of them. As an enterprise, you go and buy them. And invariably, you're going to have to buy them from multiple different vendors. And every one of them has their own variety and their own qualities. And you need to secure them, protect them, manage them, upgrade them, do all those things to them. How do you do that? And because these are IoT devices and they are tiny microcontrollers and you can't just put Norton securities on each one of them, they have a very, very wonderful AI-based traffic detection, pattern matching, all that doodah that they do, and the stuff works. Very few false positives, et cetera, et cetera. So we can cover that end of it. So between the 3 of them, we're looking at the whole end-to-end IoT thing, and probably a very good way to start our first meetup. And hopefully this goes smashingly well, and you'll go and talk to everybody, and the next time we meet, we'll just have yet another kind of a good discussion. So with that, and before we get to the panel, which we said would start at 6, so we got 10 minutes here or so, and we're going to be done by around 7. So those of you who need to rush, you can boogie out, and those who want to stay and kind of mingle, you can do that as well. And then hopefully we can take everything online and just have the kind of discussion that you can have with good, trusted friends, because that's really what this is all about at the end of the day, right? Life is long, and we want to make good friends. Okay, so if anybody is in the mood to get up and introduce yourselves, please do. Say a little bit about yourself. Say what you think Enterprise IoT is. Say what you think the challenges are and what you want to get out of this, and try to keep it to a minute if you can. Anybody volunteering to do that? I just did. Yes? Fred, maybe you can do something. Maybe I'll just put you on the spot.
My name is Fred Etamadi. Here's my badge.
I want one too.
So because I go to a lot of these things and I have a badge. I run a research lab for a large company, which is the news nowadays, and I do it for enterprise storage. And basically it's an R&D lab. We do a lot of POCs. We then send it overseas to a country which is very well known nowadays, and they do the productization. And I've been doing it for the past 7 years. But prior to that, I'm a platform designer. I've been involved with platforms all my career, from college days on. And mostly Unix. And now it's called Linux. So before that, I was in embedded stuff. I was running drivers. And I did 2 major projects which turned out to be IoT related, even though we call them M2Ms. One was for defense, and one was for a private entity. And I enjoy them both, and I want to get back to it. It is inherently in my blood. Embeddedness is inherently in my blood. Enterprise is something that I do as part of it. I believe in a lot of things that I don't have time to mention, but I really think that digitization has enabled a unification of the digits across the ecosystem, from the not only sensors and devices, but IoT to me can be a thing the size of a truck.
Yeah.
A car is an IoT. So the unification is very exciting. These are exciting times. Technology moves really fast. I read about 50 papers a week, and I don't understand any of them. It is just fantastic. AI, ML, IoT, all this stuff is very fantastic, and I'm very glad to be here. In fact, when Shaheen started this meetup, I claimed to be number 1 who joined him. He claimed not to be.
Yes.
And I immediately saw it, and I think it is a very exciting time. And if you can make something out of this IoT ecosystem, the ecosystem, not the devices, but the whole solutions. Everybody claims that it's very exciting, but nobody is putting their money in it. No major corporation come in and say, I'm going to pay you $10 million, come and build some IoT for me. But Chinese are doing it, and they're doing a fantastic job. Don't be mistaken. They are extremely smart. They are extremely advanced. And they are doing it. They are monitoring everybody, 1.5 billion people with sensors and stuff all over the streets. And they can, I've seen it personally. I go there 4 or 5 times a year. And they can recognize you in a matter of seconds, going from one city to another.
Yeah.
That's how fantastic it is. Thank you.
Very well. That actually was about a minute.
That was it. I can go for a couple hours.
In the quantum computing world, that's
Yes, that's right.
Please.
I'm Chuck Nolan. I decided after meeting some incredible scientists when I was much younger, I'm not going to get a PhD. There's too many good guys there already. But what about be in the middle and glue them together? I spent 10.5 years in advanced tech support with 3M when we owned the IT business. We had desktop computing that could compete with an IBM 360 before there were microprocessors. Later, I was a senior engineer at AMD, Logic Devices, and Monolithic Memories. Today, I mentor startups for S Foundation because it kills me to see the number of superb, talented people who fail because our educational system prepares no one properly to be a CEO. You learn it by trial and error. And I'd cite Milton Chang as the best example of that and recommend highly his book, Toward Entrepreneurship. He's an extremely successful angel, and he's happy to tell you how to do it. We need these new technologies. Cool. Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else compelled to take the floor? No? Come on. We're going to get to know you anyway, sooner or later.
Sure, I'll introduce myself. My name's Dave Roberts. I'm product manager here at Afero, and so I'm part of the group that's hosting tonight. I've been with the company for about a year, and I hadn't anything prepared, so we can leave it at that. But I could just say that I think this is a really, really exciting space, and the more people that I get to talk to out there, we see broader and broader applications for where this is going. And I think we're really at the beginning of this. We don't even exactly know what all of this really means yet in some ways. And there's going to be kind of a great unfolding in the next 10 years where we're going to see a lot of really interesting stuff happen. So we'll just leave it at that.
All right.
Yeah, so I'm Sam, and I'm originally from Virginia. And what I do in Virginia is I work for a startup, and we build web applications and mobile applications for Medicare, Medicaid. So what I'm doing currently, I get to work remote, so I just travel around from city to city, visiting different meetups and checking out what technologies they are working with. So I was excited to see Enterprise-IoT because I don't know too much about IoT. So I want to dive in and learn how that connects to everything else.
You're going to keep us honest.
That was great. It's a great line.
Jim, you want to do?
Yeah. I'm Jim Lackaboo. I'm with Afero. I run our sales team here. I was first introduced to IoT. My first conference was for a connected kitchen. I was at a small company. Our partner was Compaq. And we actually had an agent, and we talked about being able to see how your fridge was performing and get it on a little module that would be inside a fridge. So been chasing that dream of managing remote devices and monitoring things to enhance people's lives since 2000.
Cool. Right, excellent. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm Rick Cartier. I'm with Future Electronics. I'm the regional sales manager for the West Coast. We're a distributor of Afero, sorry. And I've been kind of tasked to figure out how we take something like this and for a traditional semiconductor distributor, make it quantifiable, measurable, and get the sales team figuring out how to sell it.
Perfect, perfect. So go check out their website, Future Electronics. This is a significantly large company, like 200 different countries, significant reach, and just the place you want to go look at what they have on offer. Couple more, or shall we get started? All right. Okay, so before we get started, we also want to thank Afero for being the instigator and the sponsor of the event, and of course for the pleasure of working with them for me and my colleagues for the past couple of years, and love the technology and the people and the culture and all that. As was mentioned, one of the things that makes IoT simultaneously interesting and complicated and intractable is just the sheer scope of things. That you go from semiconductor to cryptography to AI to communication protocols to energy efficiency to data structures to you name it is in there, and you got to speak those languages, and you got to bring that vocabulary together under one umbrella. So hopefully one of the things that we can achieve together is in fact that, is to bring all those vocabularies together in an environment that solves an actual problem, if not for businesses, for humanity. So with that, I'm going to go and ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and I've got some hard questions for them. If you want to ask a question, raise your hand. But we also have these cards at the end here that you can write them and pass them to me, and I will make sure that they get answered or asked at least. So, Ben, you want to get started?
Sure. So, hi everyone, thanks for coming. My name is Ben Gibbs, and I lead, as Shaheen said, I lead the Afero customer enablement team. And we're a group of field application engineers and other skill sets that basically work with Afero customers to enable them to use Afero technology. My background, I did a lot in wireless. So before coming here, I worked for Qualcomm, Atheros, and so just down the road in San Jose. And but my background primarily has been in cell phones and smartphone development. And so I've been in the US probably since '96. So I haven't completely lost my accent. I was originally from the UK, as you can probably tell. And my first experience with IoT was actually my very first job. And back in the UK, there's a company called GEC, or Marconi, as it was called at the time. And I worked in their research lab, and they had a consumer electronics brand that made washing machines and things like this. And they were putting technology into those devices to try and enable them to be controlled remotely. Now, this was the end of 1980s, all right? So, so I'd say that this concept of hooking stuff up is really, it's really quite been around for decades and decades. Yeah. So anyway, that's me.
Thank you. Yes, hello everyone. Thank you, Shane, for the forum. My name is Andy Doe. I've run a company called Embedded Works for the past 15 years. We started out, I guess, version 1.0 of our company as a component distributor, and then kind of moved up the food chain to do integration. And we cover, you know, I guess the gamut of all the wireless buzzwords, Bluetooth, Zigbee, LoRa, all that, because it's, you know, it's pick your poison when it comes to wireless technologies. And of course, through the years, we became a platform company, and I think it's cool that we have, you know, different viewpoints on what it takes to build these three simple letters, IoT, because it is, you know, an ecosystem of partners. Thinking about first time I got exposed to IoT, you know, in my world, I came from M2M, machine to machine, and before it became IoT, and very much leaning heavily on cellular. And back in those days, it was more of, you know, parking meters and things, and now anything and everything that be connected, you know, to the internet cloud, and you know, there's IoT is kind of a three-headed monster, right? It's got your device, you got to choose, you got your connectivity, and then of course you got your platform, and I think the three of us represent different parts of that, you know, starting, middle, and end. So, you know, love to kind of openly discuss how you know, we can help you and maybe see where IoT is headed.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, Dan Meyer, run marketing at Zingbox, and I'd probably take a different view to IoT than most of the rest of the people in the room. I guess we are looking kind of at the end customer's perspective of things, and you know, where our focus comes in is around security and management of the whole ecosystem of connected devices that an enterprise is struggling with at times. So, and where they tend to struggle often is around the security of those devices. You know, one of the things that we've seen over the last several years, you know, we've got about 11 million devices under management at this point that we're monitoring, and what we've seen is that the networks of our customers now are, you know, 50% of the devices, or the endpoints are IoT devices now, right? And that's a pretty significant percentage. So half of the network is IoT. And so the challenge for an organization that has this heterogeneous cloud of connected devices is what do you do to try and secure and optimize and manage those things. And it turns out that there's a life cycle that you know, that the devices take from beginning to end. How do you onboard them? How do you end of life them? How do you upgrade them along the way? And for any single app, and especially for new apps, you can control that, right? But for what people have found is like the lobster in the pot, right? The heat's been going up, and people have found, oh, I have a huge volume of connected devices on my network. How do I take care of those things? How do I manage and secure those? And so that's kind of the perspective that I will take in this discussion from that perspective.
Yeah, excellent.
Right?
Very good. Okay, so first question, and I got 10 of them here, which will probably last us, 5 hours, but we'll have fun with them, and please chime in. So we start with building it. So I look at the demo videos that are out there, and we've got one, and Afero's got one, and you guys, and it makes it trivial to connect something. And you say, whoa, there's nothing to it. Anybody can do this. I just saw it, right? Well, then you kind of turn the page, and it says 75% of enterprise IoT projects fail. So we went from like trivially simple to almost everybody fails. So what's happening? Where's the disconnect, right? What are the challenges? And what do you see that is kind of actually in between people and nirvana? So Andy, you want to take that?
Yeah, and from my perspective, you know, we have customers that come to us and most of the time want to build everything, and it's not necessarily the best place to start. You know, first customers say, well, I want the lowest BOM cost. Well, that starts with the component, but do you know that it costs $250,000 to $500,000 to certify a cellular product in the market? It's probably not the best overall ROI for a customer to start with a cellular component. So maybe you might want to use a modem, or maybe, you know, cellular isn't a thing for you because you have to pay, you know, the monthly fee, which no one likes to do, so Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, but that has its constraints. So when we engage in a customer, we always ask them, okay, what is your use case, and what is your distance, what is your power consumption? You have to go through this litany of questions in order to get to the technology, because there is no single, you know, end-all wireless standard. There's a reason why multiple standards exist and why certain standards die and certain standards have thrived. So we in the beginning of the IoT, we help you choose the technology, the device, and once you get that part honed down, and then we ask, so how are you going to manage all this? And then that's where my panelist partners here will say, well, here's how you make it secure. Here's how you analyze and all that. So hardware selection and connectivity selection is a big deal, and need to spend more time rather than choosing the cheapest part.
So what do you see among your prospects that you wish they got right? Is that you go there and they want to do something, oh God, no, they shouldn't be doing that. Is there anything that shows up as a pattern that is like that?
Yeah, when companies who have never done wireless before, that's a whole different level of skill set. I mean, RF engineers are, very hard to come by.
Yeah.
And so, you don't want to jump in and think that your best, software guy or your best hardware guy even knows, RF. You want to have that skill set in mind, or outsource it in phase one and then insource it. So that's a different mindset, and it is IoT. I always say IoT is I own that. You really have to own it, right? You have to make sure that you have partner A, B, and C, bring it together, but someone has to be the glorified project manager when you're doing IoT.
Excellent. You want to chime in?
Yeah, I got some insights here. So
Yeah.
I think that one of the challenges with enterprise IoT is why is the company wanting to do this in the first place, right? And you asked, why does 75% of projects fail? I heard the stat that any engineering project in a company has a 75% chance of failure, right? So it's not just IoT, but I think that what it boils down to is we're talking about companies, so we're talking about businesses, right? We're talking about money, right? There has to be a positive return on your investment. And so then the question is, how much are we willing to spend and how much are we willing to get back? And so if the business case isn't there, either to make money, save money, or reduce risk, then they're really not going to want to do it. But that isn't always clear right at the beginning. And so one of the, I'll give you an example. So we had a company that, I'll just talk about in general terms, but initially they had a business plan that said, we will put this technology into 70,000 locations around the country. And we know that the business case tells us that if we could reduce, by putting in this technology, if you could reduce tech support calls by 1% to what we're currently seeing, then we will, that will pay for the business, that'll pay for everything, right? And on paper, it looked like a great business case to start off with, right? But then over time, the companies, once people started getting involved with it, the business case, that 70,000 initially dropped down to 10,000, right? It was like, well, actually, we don't have control over that full 70,000. We can only really push it into 10,000 locations. And then it became, further down the line, it was like, well, maybe we shouldn't jump straight to 10,000. That's rather aggressive. Maybe we should just target 1,000. And this is where the business case revenue potential or opportunity was going down. But one of the things that I find with IoT is the hardware will not go down. Like if you reduce the hardware cost is really important to consider. So that hardware cost is going to be up here, and so if you're lowering the opportunity, actually your hardware costs can go up, because now what had happened was that they were then going to places like Taiwan, and they were saying, can you build us this box which will go into these locations, and we'll like to buy initially maybe 1,000, but we'd like to start off by buying 300. Okay, guys, right? Time out, right? Because no way, right? When you're talking about 70,000, then maybe the Taiwanese guys are going to be interested, right? And so then the cost just went out through the roof, the business case collapsed, and that was it, right? So I think that why did projects fail? Lots of different reasons, but I always say if you haven't got your business case right from the beginning, if you really haven't got that properly nailed down and you stick to it, it's gonna fail. And that could be anything, that's not just IoT.
So I want to summarize this. One of them was I own that. We're gonna all remember that.
Yeah, trademark that.
I think it's already open source. The other one is the different skill sets that are required. You mentioned that even your best engineers may not be the best RF engineers. Don't just assume that it's just another tech area. It isn't. So that kind of implies to me that you need a certain level of depth before you can do something in IoT, and it's not enough to just say, how hard can it be? It's going to be hard, right? And then the third thing was the business case.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so you need like a business case that holds as you
There
as you
is
keep doing
also
that.
one more thing which I'll just chip in, and that is because you mentioned it, and that's security, right? I've talked to a number of companies who and this is a joke almost within Afero, they don't want the I part of IoT, right? They don't want it actually connected to that horrible big bag internet. They just want OT, right?
Yeah.
They want to connect the devices, and there are definitely situations within that. Often we hear airports or these places which are air gapped or whatever, where they just want the local network connectivity, but the whole idea of connecting it to the internet is a problem. And sometimes we see this with factories as well. Factories don't really want, they're afraid, it's the first time they've ever had data go out of the factory.
Right.
Then they're very, very worried. And this reminds me a lot about when I first came into the US in the 90s, people were talking about these very mysterious things called VPNs. That it was possible to send data from one part of the network on the internet to another part securely. And when I first heard about it, I was like, really? I can't believe that's possible. And then they explained how, and it was a guy from Nortel who was explaining it to me, right? And I kind of like feel like almost sometimes we're in that same situation. They're like, we were afraid. We don't want to even connect to the internet.
So in fact, my next question was about security, IoT security.
Oh,
and so it's a good it's a good segue to that, because there's a lot to discuss in that just one area. And the question is that there's a new vulnerability every day. So really, one part of me says, when do we give up? Don't the bad guys already have every piece of data in triplicate, right? Do they, just like go, why don't we do that, right? And then when can we go from security best practices? Because every time I see security, it's best practices. There's no guarantee. There's no nothing. It's just like, we're going to do our best, and come what may, and God forbid I'm going to say it's not, So there's no sort of saying it's unbreakable or it's secure to this level. There's not. So what are the challenges really, and how do we go about solving them? I know you guys have really novel ways of doing it, so maybe Dan, you can take this one first, and then others chime in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, and I think that organizations are struggling with it. We just had a webinar this morning with some chief information security officers in the healthcare space, right? And they've got connected medical devices that have patient safety at risk, right? If something happens, they get hacked, they get taken down, somebody could die, or PHI, private information can be leaked out, right? So they're really concerned. But I think that they're struggling because they feel like they're doing some things. There are some organizational challenges to security between IT and the operational technology folks. So a lot of times there's a number in manufacturing and in healthcare and some other places. The people who own the technology that you're deploying are not the same people who own security for the organization, right? And so there's an organizational barrier to some of that stuff happening. But I think there's also an issue, around security in terms of depending on the device. What can you do? And if you're starting from a blank sheet of paper, you can design something that's secure, right? It's encrypted and there's good authentication and other things. But if you've got legacy devices out there, what do you do to actually understand whether these devices are compromised or not? And even if you're on the network, and you don't want to connect to the internet, if something else gets compromised on the network, everything else, from outside, that stuff can spread potentially, right? So there's some serious challenges. I mean, the approach that we've taken is by listening to all the network traffic and identifying things that are anomalous, right? It's kind of a non-intrusive approach to identifying and securing the devices to the extent you can. So it's kind of a wraparound of the network rather than trying to get onto the device. But that's because we're external to the device itself, right? We're trying to apply third-party controls out to existing devices, right? So that's kind of the perspective that I've got.
Yeah. You know, I'd like to chime in on what you said, because when I see my customers get to market, and you know, they'll spend a good solid 2 years building a product, it's got pretty packaging, and it's done, and then they wash their hands of a product, and everybody steps back. And I've seen security holes and all that, and where I've like, you know, each company should have a security task force, you know, after the fact. It's not just, you know, you can't do some of this parallel because you haven't seen it yet. So I think, you know, being, you know, the different parts of, you know, bringing product to market, there needs to be a security task force after you've released a product, because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know the vulnerabilities of this chipset or this module, or somewhere in the chain somebody didn't do something right. Right, so you know.
But there's going to be something,
yeah,
right?
There's something, yeah.
I think you can almost guarantee there's
Yeah.
going to be some issue that you're going to have to upgrade the firmware. You're going to have to do something, right? Yeah, patch bugs. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a realization coming from the hardware business. I used to make flip phones, and we would make the phone, we would sell it, and then be done and move on to the next one. And our accounting was built around that. Our engineering teams were built around that. Once they'd done, they moved on. And with smartphones, we had to come to the realization that when we put out a smartphone, it would need updating with software for the lifetime of that device. And it was very, very difficult within the organization to even budget for it. How could we assign money towards that? And or you kind of needed a sustaining engineering team to manage those releases. And then the question was, where's the money coming from, right? Now, for some companies like Apple, they make money on like the App Store, and so they have ongoing revenue. But on the Android side, where I was, right, we would sell the device, and we wouldn't make any money out of it from then on. It was the carrier, AT&T, right? It was Google, and any app developers, but not us, right? And so there was no incentive from a money standpoint. With IoT, it almost is like worse, because a lot of this IoT stuff will be in the market or be in the field for years, maybe decades. We make stuff that goes into washing machines or fridges, and they definitely have a 10-year life cycle, at least, right? Lifetime. So that is actually a realization I think a lot of the manufacturers or anyone who's doing IoT has to come about, that security is not a solved problem. You can't just solve it. It's an ongoing issue, right? In fact, it could get worse. It may get worse because the more stuff you have out there, the more likely you are to be attacked.
Exactly.
Right? The bigger the opportunity for the hacker, right? So it's actually quite a bit of a mindset that has to change. That this is ongoing.
Yeah, I would say that mindset's changed even in my own company, where, you know, we've had our IT folks maybe said, well, we want to stay on this version of Windows or whatever because it's solid and everything, right? And then of course it's, you know, someone figured out security hole, and then okay, we move to the next one. So I think the mindset overall is that you know, getting the security patches, it's a norm now, right? It's a norm, and so you want to have, you know, the latest updates to your phone, because, you know, overall we're trying to, you know, CYOA, you know, everybody, right? So I think the mindset is there. And in terms of IoT, you know, I see us like we're all living in this $10 economy of, you know, subscription, right? Everything's $10, your Ring doorbell, everything. And so, to me, I'm okay with that. With Netflix, I'm okay paying $10 for a lot of little things to make sure I'm totally secure, up to date. You know, where, you know, I would say 10, 15 years ago, you're very protective. This is my data. Now somehow, you know, as a society, we trust the cloud guys, and there's probably 6 or 8 of those guys in the world that we, you know, say that we trust, right? The AWS, the Azure, and all these. So we have now basically relinquished our private data to a company that we trust to do the right thing and be secure, and that's the world we live in. And you know, I never thought today there's a certain data that I would not house, you know, on site. Now, heck, I want everything off site. You know,
they're better at it.
It's better at it,
Yeah.
you know, and it's a totally different mindset, you know.
Yeah. So let's summarize this one. So my walk away is that different mindset. You have to think about it differently, and be open to new technologies. Whether it's AI, in your case, agentless, all that others, or whether it's cloud in your case, or maybe deep cryptography in your case. But there are new technologies that come to the rescue.
But I think the other thing I would summarize is there is a life cycle, right? And that you
Yeah.
need to figure out a way to plan and support for maintenance of the devices in the long run over time, over the course of their life cycle, which can be really long-lived, right?
Yep.
And that's challenging.
Yep.
Right.
You can't say we're not going to do it anymore, right? I mean, it's like the web didn't die, right? It just evolved, and so we paid the antivirus subscription, and or maybe we didn't anymore, but
Someone else did.
it has spam was a terrible problem. I actually I started a sort of like there was not a company, but I started a big thing within one company which was all around anti-spam software. And now, we still get spam, right? But it could have been a lot worse, So I think that it's manageable, but it's always going to be there.
So let's talk a little about life cycle, because that's like, the beginning of it we talked about, even the middle of it we talked about. Let's talk about like the end of it. So now you're getting ready to, let your fridge go play golf now and retire, and but what are the issues there? Because now you have to worry about what data still resides on it, and is there an exposure issue? So this security thing isn't going away even after you're like trying to retire the thing, right? Any comments on that?
Go ahead. Well, I would say from a life cycle, we're experiencing that now with the customers today who have to, embrace, or not embrace, but really prepare for 2G is, dead, and 2G is good enough speed for a lot of things in this world, so we really can still use it. But the carriers here in the U.S. have said, well, I'm going to take that 2G spectrum, I'm going to go 4G, and I'm going to make a poor man's 4G with NB-IoT and Cat-M. It's going to do that, but they're still going to charge you the way they normally charge. And that's how, I've seen the carriers just make a killing through the years, and that's why they're acquiring Yahoo and all that, because that's the new cash cow, with the carriers. And so they own the network, and they've been able to do that. And so, life cycle any technology, because certain companies have the ability to shut down the networks, are forcing you to upgrade to 3G or 4G. And in fact, a lot of companies are actually skipping 3G because why bother? I got the slow stuff and I got the fast stuff. Don't need the middle stuff, So it's I'm seeing a big movement in my industry where people have to make decisions. Do I wait to the very end and to milk the thousands or tens of thousands of units that I have in the field, or do I invest now knowing that it will be shut off one day?
Yeah, I in terms of the life cycle, I see a culture clash, I guess, a clash between the high rate of churn or you get with like a cell phone. Like you have a cell phone for a certain number of years, and then in high tech, we're kind of like used to the idea of like short life cycles. But with old tech, so today we're talking about kitchen equipment, right? To talk about enterprise IoT. So this is heavy-duty kitchen equipment that lasts decades, and yet when you add IoT to it, then it has its own problems. It almost like degrades the lifetime of that device.
Goes obsolete.
If you're not careful. And we see this with certain actually IoT systems where the company, for example, gets acquired and then the parent company says, yeah, we're not actually going to do that anymore, and cancels it, right? And then what will happen, right? Suddenly does that whole cooker or range stop working? Or how do you retrofit those items? So there is a lot of, you're basically adding high obsolescence technology to a low obsolescence technology, and there's a clash there. And it's kind of sad, because I'm very much into repairing stuff, right? I like to, I don't want, so I think, how could we fix this, right? I think one way is, like you mentioned about the 2G, right? There's a whole bunch of networking stuff out there, old style IoT, that 2G's basically
plenty good.
they can't use it anymore. It's going to die, and I don't know what's going to happen. Landfill, I don't know. But also the same with the security, right? If it's obsolete security, that's no good either, right? So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to fix all of that.
See, I'm waiting for the day when you have to move houses because your existing house is like not compatible with the new OS that you need to run, but then you can't also let go of it because it knows too much.
I have a question here, and that's, I just recently read an article about how they were overdriving these LED in a TV for a planned end of life of this TV. Basically, the light would die prematurely after like 3 years, and then you buy a new TV. Would you actually think that this might actually come to the IoT where companies plan end of life at 3 years, and then you shut a product down? I mean, have you ever heard of any case of that, where like, okay, after 3 years you pay another $5 to
your
use
iPhone, your phone?
That's a good point.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it goes back to that whole business side of things, right? Internet of Things stuff connects to the internet, and that implies there's a service somewhere that has to be paid and run for, right, on whatever cloud service, right? And then the question is, how do you pay for that? Do you pay for it upfront for a certain lifetime, or do you pay every month? I think a number of us have been offered yearly subscriptions to things that we think, I never want to pay for that. Really, I'll take the free year that they give me. I think BMW is a good example. You can kind of like get like a
Roadside.
the first year. Yeah, you get the first year for free, and then or Sirius XM, that's another one, right? You get it with the new car for a certain number of months, and then after that, you're like, do you really want to pay for that? And you're like, no, I don't really want to. But the reason for that is because something has, that's maybe an overpriced service, but it has to be paid for somehow. And so your question is, how long are these Internet of Things going to be connected? Forever? No. Yeah. And then the question is, does the provider cut them off? I don't know. It's a good question.
Definitely a big question about the length of life.
Well, you see it with like ink cartridges, right? I
Yeah.
saw a picture of a guy who, like, just recently, every time his ink cartridge ran out, he broke it open and poured it into a jar. And over a year, he ended up with like half a gallon of ink. Yeah, of each color, and because they were supposedly empty.
Yeah.
So any final comment on compliance, end of life?
Well, it's just one other point on end of life the way that I think about it a little bit is there data on that device at the
Yeah.
endpoint, right? And so I think there's there's two classes, right? Those that don't store anything, right? And they're just sending the signals, but those that are actually, there's a lot of instances where you're actually storing data on the endpoint. And so in terms of the end of life, you got to understand whether the data at that endpoint is sensitive and needs to be remediated somehow before you dispose of that equipment. So for example, in the case of printers, think about a printer scanner, right? Like, you store all the documents on the printer scanner a lot of times, right? And I know that there was a hospital that got fined for not cleaning off the printer that was leased, right, when they got rid of it, because it had patient data on it, right? And so there's sensitive stuff there, and I'm sure there's lots of instances on that, but so there's a data versus no data endpoint is another issue.
I think that's a really big deal as well. Okay, so now let's move to multi-IoT, as I call it, right? So I build one connected device, and it's going great, and then I manage to iron out the wrinkles, and I scale, and I've got 1 million users out there, and I'm just a unicorn and flying high, and then I'm going to upgrade it. So now I have to actually do a new one without kind of the benefit of having nothing. I already have this big, large installed base, and now I have a new one, so there's that sort of a complexity. And because I've done so well, I dream up connecting 15 other things that are completely different things. Like my washing machines did great. I'm going to do a fridge. The fridge has done well. I want to do an oven. And, so take me through the complexities of that compared to the demo that we talked about way back that made it all so easy.
Well,
Who wants to take that?
I'll take this one because I've experienced customers telling me about a pain point. You know, the whole upgrade the firmware over the air, you know, and again, I'll go back to cellular because there's a lot to
Right,
it.
yeah.
But I mean, you know, when you're upgrading a firmware, you know, it could be a 1 meg or whatever image, and try multiplying that 1,000,000 times when you have that, and then paying the man, you know, every month for 1,000,000 of those 1 megs, that adds up pretty quickly. So the technology that you want to kind of look for is, you know, differential things like, you know, firmware over the air differential, so you're only updating the new stuff, and so there's all sorts of tricks that you can play to save money, you know, but, you know, it's coming, and especially when you're using technology like that, where, you know, we're all used to updating our phones, it's going to happen probably 4 times a year, so you have to kind of budget that. And like my friend here said, you know, most people build IoT, they don't really think about the maintenance costs of it. You know, it's, you know, you build it, you think, okay, this is my margin I'm going to make, but what about the maintenance that it takes to keep it the cloud, the over-the-air updates, the connectivity costs? You know, so you know, look for technologies that, you know, that is not going to chip away at, you know, your cost to run it.
Ben or Dan? Multi-IoT.
So you mean like multi-product?
Multi-product.
Multi-product.
Multi-device
Or
types.
Multi-device types.
Multi-device types. I've done one device, and now I have a different beast.
Right.
Good news is I've done one, and I know how to do it. Bad news is it's a different thing. And do I have to do everything from scratch?
Well, ideally,
do I have to?
No. And you could use a system like Afero to do that. All right, that's the end of the advertisement.
Okay. Softball there, right?
No, I think that when you're building, this also comes down to make versus buy, right? So are you building it yourself, or are you getting someone else to build it? And can it tie into the system that you've already got, right? So one of the other factors that I think enterprise folks need to bear in mind when they're thinking about IoT is the manpower cost, right, or the head count, let's put it that way, right? Because it is quite possible, and we've seen this, where companies will they'll start with an IT group, or they'll start with an engineer or two, and then they will hire some other people because they need to get a little bit more experience, maybe they need some DevOps folks, and they'll end up hiring until they end up with a team of about 50 people who are looking after all of their staff. And when you bring on extra products, that's going to add extra complexity and stuff. So I think that can be a danger when it comes to, going back to the business case side of things, these devices better justify themselves, right? So what are these extra devices doing? On the consumer side, hopefully you're selling them and making money. On the enterprise side, you presumably are improving your processes, or you are reducing your risk or something like that.
So one thing about these multiple device types that we all, I'm sure, have experienced is that you buy a connected device and it comes with its own app. And then you buy another one, and then another app, another one, another app. And then there comes a time when you get to where I am, is that I don't want another app. If it's got an app, I don't want it. If it's got a web thing, maybe I'll take it. So how do we fix that? Or is there a fix for it?
Yeah.
Yet another app. So.
Well, no one wants another app. Yeah, you
yeah, exactly.
I think a lot of it comes down to, and that's just on the enterprise side, they may be using apps, or they may be using web portals or whatever, but ideally you want to, one of the key points I think about Internet of Things is standardization, right? I mean, there's got to be some way whereby I can get the data out in a format that is not alien and not proprietary and things like this. And we've seen JSON data as a reasonable format for sort of moving stuff around.
Well, one place you are seeing it is with these voice assistants. So now I figure, okay, if Alexa can manage it, I'm probably fine, except that you have to be fine with Alexa to begin with. But if you are, then maybe that can be the hub for you. Do you see that moving to an area like that, where you kind of have the Apples and Samsungs and Googles of the world just kind of owning that piece?
I wholeheartedly agree. Kind of voice is kind of the next gold rush. And
Well,
yeah.
well, is it or is it a fad?
I don't think it's a fad because once you're used to telling your Alexa, whatever you need from this song, it's kind of hard to wean yourself
And it
off of
becomes
that.
ice.
And to your question, I was thinking about the last time someone tried to consolidate, or at least for me personally, there was an app years ago called Trillion or something where they would try to consolidate AOL Messenger, Yahoo Messenger, like all the messengers, right? And ultimately, and I remember downloading it and saying, that's what a cool idea that was. Well, it turns out it didn't have 90% of the features of the specific messenger had. All it did was just...
It was the lowest common
Yeah, it was the
denominator.
lowest common denominator, right? I'm like, well, that's not good. Well, I want to do my happy face. I can't do it,
Right,
So,
right.
it had some weaknesses. And I'm like you. I mean, I have a folder for, third-party apps, and it keeps getting bigger. And, when I try to resist, I'm like, yeah, but you could do this. So, having, kind of this standard or, open API or something like that. But then, you need a developer to kind of bring that together. A consumer's not going to bring that together, right? Yeah.
So if you're a company with enough heft, then maybe you can have the so-called super app.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that I think in enterprise, in different segments, you actually see some of that happening. So you see maybe building automation systems that bring together a bunch of the different sensors in an environment right into a single integrated management platform. I think in industrial control systems, right, in manufacturing plants, you'll see that where there's a spectrum of controls. But, I think that organizations trying to manage the complexity of their environment and needing to have visibility and control over that whole spectrum of things will drive some of that, right? And then the giant manufacturers who have a large scope of the products out there are going to help drive that as well, right? Because they'll provide the overall platform and an open standard for these new devices to integrate into. So I think you'll see it where there's money. On the consumer side, it's an interesting one. But I like the Alexa on the consumer side is really interesting because it's now you're saying you control all your home automation, right? And so you're starting to see that even on the consumer side start to emerge. It sounds like.
Okay.
Yeah, on the industrial side, what I have seen is there's a few consolidating companies, right? Where there's one just up the road. I won't mention the name, but they. What they do is they take the data from all the various IoT generating sensors in the factory or the space, and they're really what they are is a data historian, right? So what they want to do is they want to suck up all the data from these various devices and store it, and their value that they offer the company is essentially one dashboard that everyone in the company can go to and basically have the same view of what that particular, how things are going, right? Because with a company that has different IoT systems, what can happen is someone can have in one particular department can have one view about how things are going. Someone in a different department can say, well, this is how I view it. And what they were trying to offer was actually a consolidated view of it. Now, how do they go about that? Or how do they go about that? Basically, it's almost a brute force approach. It's where they have to write adapters for every single device that is out there to convert whatever the data is that particular pump or door or machinery is generating and send it to them in their format, right? And so they claim that they have, if you go to the website, they claim that they have like over 500 different adapters for all these different types of equipment. And that's actually really their IP, right? That's why you go to them. And although that's great for them and they're pretty successful, they call themselves an IoT company, but they're not really. They're really just a data collection company.
Legacy data collection.
Legacy data, yeah. And so, I asked them, what do you do with all this data? And it reminded me of the Dilbert cartoon where he gets told to take all this data, all these files to the archive place. And he takes them to the archive place, and the guy is basically just chucking them away because he knows that no one's ever going to ask for them. And I always thought, where are you putting all this data? And they're like, well, we're storing it. Promise. And but what apparently the idea is that you can check, how is this pump working? How was it working 3 years ago? Is it the same sort of way that it's working and things like this? That's the theory. does anyone ever do it? I don't know, right?
Yeah.
But
You got the data, so what's the valuable app you put on top of that, like predictive maintenance, for example, on
Ideally,
top of that,
yeah.
right? Yeah, but those apps need to be developed too,
Right,
right?
right.
Now that you've got this massive volume of data.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to get the value out of the data, right?
Okay, so that's a segue into platforms, because there are a lot of IoT platforms out there. You got one, you've played with many, you have one in kind of a different way. So what should people look for in a platform? How can I tell that this platform is for me? What are the use cases, the requirements, what I'm doing now, what I'm going to be doing 2 years from now? How many things am I going to put? What are those parameters that can give me some feel for what it does? If you're in the mood, you can also just say what you mean by a platform, but not necessarily.
You're the platform guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a hard question. You do it.
All right. So what it really boils down to for me is like, do you want the tools or do you want the product? Like for example, Home Depot sells you tools. If you want to build a house, you could probably go to Home Depot and you could buy all the, the bits and pieces to build a house, just about, right? Or you could buy a house and spend all your money on decorating it, right? So I think that when it comes to platforms, there's a lot of different types, right? So some people would say, like Azure is a platform, right? Or Azure IoT is a platform, or AWS IoT is a platform. Sort of. I think that they're a little bit more infrastructure in that they will provide you the nuts and bolts and you have to then build it, right? And therefore you have to hire people to do that. And maybe at the end you feel like you own it, maybe, but it's an effort, right? So yeah, they're a platform, and then there's other folks which have actually done all that work already, and then you basically go and use them, and then you build on top of that. So I think what it boils down to is the platform is the thing that you build on. Ideally, it's like the abstraction layer below which you don't want to be bothered with any of that, right? So you want to build on top of the platform, and that should be, in theory, your value add, right? So when I bought a house in Silicon Valley, I didn't go out and build a house. I bought a house, right? And then I repaired the roof because it's a seller's market, and but that's what I'd say. So. I don't know if that helps, but I'd say that it's very important for the company to identify what are they going to get out of the platform first of all.
Right. My experience for platform, because I come from GPS telematics industry, our customers, for the most part, are okay with us storing their, vehicle location data on our cloud, our server. But then you have customers that, where they're in another country and they say, well, we don't want you to know where our police cars are. And so we want, the portability. So if you have a platform and to be portable, where you can put a VM and, plop it into another cloud, people are asking for that. People are looking for portability and to be able to say, I kind of own this, even though it's your platform, but at least I know it's under my jurisdiction for the country, and whatnot. So that's some of the requests that I have seen from a platform perspective, also, scale. And when I look at, this kind of pyramid of, cloud, and we mentioned there's fewer of those guys, and there's platform, and there's more of those guys, and then there's integrator, and there's a lot more of those guys. So I see some consolidation in certain platforms and as time progresses, but I mean right now we're in this bubble of
platform
providers, and even project management tools are platforms, and everybody
wants to be a platform.
Everybody wants to be a platform, and for those that can kind of lead out into more hardware or other kind of disciplines, I think those platforms are going to be more robust.
All right. Comments?
Yeah, I mean, and this is more just thinking out loud, but I think that there's going to be an interesting evolution in the IoT industry. As you see, there's some do-it-yourself platforms, right, where people build your own, right? But I think the interesting area where you're going to see a lot more evolution over time is the line of business and application platforms where somebody's actually got enough critical mass to build the whole life cycle support that we've been talking about, right? And an economic model that let end customers take these IoT applications and apply them and deploy them for their own competitive advantage. And I think those are going to be very industry and sector specific and application specific kinds of platforms over time.
So I'll add to this also to show my own bias is that I think a platform needs to abstract and let you not worry about what underlying choices you make, and then let you change your mind if you want to, because you don't care, because it sits between you and all that mess. So I kind of see it as a software blanket on top of stuff. The problem, of course, is that in the IoT world, the stuff is not in one place. It's like everywhere, from the device and the radio and the cloud and the mobile app. And so kind of imagining a single software blanket over all of that is not common. I think if it were, we'd be calling it operating system by now. But it isn't, so we don't. And then we call it a platform, and we don't know what that means. So, any questions from our illustrious audience before I go to one more?
So,
all right.
Is there like a magic number in terms of volume that you need for, is it, when you're building like 5 things, if I tinker, it kind of, maybe the platform is not that important, but like, maybe it is at like 100 or maybe 100,000 or like, I don't know if that is a question, but like when does it make sense to kind of?
When it hurts when you have to do it yourself.
Yeah. Or have to repeat it. Go back to your point about, like multiple products. I think, people have learned. I think about the iOS, right? That's kind of like a platform that people build apps on, and they make good. There are people who make good money out of it, right? And that's a skill that you can learn how to use, and you can reuse it from app to app to app, right? If there's something akin on the IoT side of things where you like learned how to, if this wonderful software blanket thing, if you could write apps that worked with all IoT devices or systems, or perhaps all of the IoT stuff was abstracted and you were just operating at the data level, right? So that that would be quite amazing, So then you would, so I'd say it's, to answer your question, I think it is once you start scaling, then it's important.
Clearly, if you're not scaling, you're not.
It's just a hobbyist, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can see if you're doing like a nuclear power reactor, maybe 5 of those is enough.
Well, it's hard when you're starting out to know how many you're going to sell.
Right.
Obviously, everyone will sell hundreds of millions.
I think that goes to the business case that was mentioned, that if you get that right, then you kind of aren't surprised. Okay, so let's move to this other area, and here I do, please.
Dan talked about 50% of devices in enterprises are IoT.
50, yeah, on the network.
On the network, inside the enterprise?
Yeah, so inside the enterprise network.
Tell me more about that. That was the most sort of mind-blowing number to me.
He's got a lot of data.
Yeah. Well, so you've got IT managed devices, right? You've got laptops and servers and routers and things like that. That's 50% of the devices you see on the network. But what we've seen now is that there's the other half, the invisible half of the network is all of these other connected devices that are on the network that are actually endpoints on the network, right? And so, security cameras and IP phones and printer scanners, and that's just the office stuff. And then there's the building automation, badge readers, right? HVAC systems, and then depending on what industry you're in, there's a whole bunch of other connected devices. In healthcare, there's a bunch of connected medical devices. There's in the industrial plants, you've got a lot of controls, right? Industrial controls and things. So what we've seen is that I think Cisco had predicted that the network would be 50% IoT devices by 2021. But we're already there.
I think we're right there.
Yeah.
And so that's inside a corporate network.
Yes.
So it's everything within a
Yes.
corporate.
On an enterprise or a
is
corporate network, yeah.
They're almost non-computing devices. They're digital devices, but non-computing.
They're connected devices,
They're connected,
right?
yeah, okay.
And so they're not necessarily internet connected, but they're network connected
Yeah.
devices, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I think the document I was reading that you guys produced had them as directly and indirectly connected. So the indirect connection also counts because it is kind of, you can handle your way through. Now, maybe this is a good segue to talk about IT and OT. So,
Yeah.
you know, the IT guys, we're fortunate because there's a whole department called IT. The OT guys, operational technology, there's no like department of OT. So they're kind of departmentless. On the other hand, they kind of own a lot of devices that are OT. So can any of you maybe then speak to the whole IT-OT convergence, collision, what's kind of happening, what dynamic you see?
Yeah, I mean, so the, you know, the operational technology guys are really, you know, there's a different focus from what the IT guys are worried about, right? The OT guys are worried about, you know, performance and uptime and things like that, right? The IT guys are worried about, you know, compliance and you know, asset management and maybe security as well, right? But now that we've seen a lot of hacks on, you know, industrial plants and other devices, you know, the worlds are starting to cross. We actually had one client, their board of directors said, look, do we have an IoT security process in place? So they said, no, well, we got to go get one because at the board level, we're now worried about the risk exposure we have if something happens because our IoT devices get hacked, right? And so, but there's still that who owns it issue, which is really tricky because in a healthcare setting, the guys are saying, look, you IT guys can't touch, you can't scan my X-ray machine because it's mission critical, right? You can't put an antivirus agent on that thing, right? So, you know, because because I can't perform if you've got that, right? And so it's a real challenge, but I think we've seen, you know, just from my perspective, our specific slice of the world, you know, security is actually getting more power in this because one of the things I think is because the insurance companies are pushing it, right? Mm-hmm. If you have to buy cyber risk insurance, right, then you know, you got to prove how secure you are, and more insurance companies are pushing organizations to think about this aspect.
Yeah, excellent. This is another very, very good. Okay, so I want to bring it to the market. So we call this group Enterprise IoT, together with Consumer IoT and Industrial IoT. If you look at the website Meetup, I just put up a new graph. So all today I was racking my brain to get some parallels going, so I got it. So consumer is like customer experience, and IoT, Industrial IoT, is operational excellence, and Enterprise IoT is digital transformation. So I got my CX, DX, and OX over there. As a marketing guy, I can go home now. But what I wanted to, and hopefully I can get your participation on this, is how do we define these segments? How do you define the market? And I've seen some of the slides that you did that like quite awesome. And how do you guys define this whole IoT market? I mean, Internet of Things, everything is a thing, so it's like everything, and everything is already classified in the, you know, the myriad of ways that it already is. How do we put our arms around it? So, you know, maybe you want to start because the whole device type and, you know.
Yeah, we kind of think of it as a pyramid, that there's, at the top level, there's stuff that's mission critical, these devices which are critical for your business, that if they go down, your business stops working for some reason, right? Or your patient stops breathing, or whatever it is, right? There's another layer that's much more productivity enhancing, right? So these are things that work better, or you work better because these things are intelligent somehow, right? And then I think at the bottom layer, there's an area what we're calling more pervasive IoT, which is, you know, smart cities and things that make, you know, much more of an you know, geographically dispersed ecosystem better for various reasons. And so that's kind of the tiers that we look at for ourselves.
Yeah, to some of that, I agree where, you know, if you do, let's say consumer IoT, I view it as one hub. You know, internet is a hub, but, you know, so, and then you've got the industrial, maybe that's 2 to 3 hubs, where you have to have, you know, different, you know, QGT brokers and this and that, and, you know, you kind of put it together.
Hop or hub?
Hub. To
Both
me,
of
it's
them.
kind of the same, yeah.
Okay.
So maybe hub is a better term. And then, of course, enterprise, where you have a conglomerate of different hubs that having to, you know, manage bit pieces of a device or a system. So maybe, you know, the number of hubs that one has to use, you know, the demarcation might be, you know, 1, 3, and 5. I'm not sure, because it depends. That's probably how I would categorize it.
So I coming from Afero, where we want to make money out of IoT, and we sell to companies like Kenmore and others. And I went to a standards group that was a JavaScript standards group geared around IoT. And that's when I met the anarchists of IoT, who were almost like, what do you mean, business in IoT? You know, like IoT should only be about things talking to each other, using internet protocol, you know, and the whole idea of having them even going to a server, that was very, they got very upset about the security implications of that and the data, and they just were really, really fundamentalist around the idea that this should only be about devices communicating. Like, fine, and so I actually changed my presentation to say pragmatic IoT, because you know, money talks, right? It gets things working. So I think that there is a kind of like way of thinking, which is, you know, I can segment the market into consumer, commercial, like commercial would perhaps be like restaurants, that kind of thing, and then industrial. But I think there are also folks who are still the dreamers, which is like, everything should talk to everything, and it's nothing to do with business. Stop bothering me with money, right? I'll just throw that out there.
Anybody in the audience want to chime in on how you define the market?
I think there's an issue with putting a blanket on top of one term called IoT. I have issues with that. I do agree that there is segmentation involved in the industry. I just happen to be in an organization which is in the top 15 in the world, revenue-wise. And they do have segmentation. And there's the consumers, there's enterprise. Interestingly enough, they put AI in enterprise recently. And then there's CIT, communication and telephony and fixed. And I think just my opinion, by the way, I think it's a mistake to put a blanket on top of IoT and call everything IoT. I think you have to be very focused in how we define it. I think industrial IoT is very well defined. It is static, location-wise, mostly, right? Transportation is very well defined. It's dynamic. It moves. Consumer and wearing it. These are very well defined terms. And the companies that are trying to put everything under one blanket, they most likely not succeed. I think focus is very important. And I understand that you make the devices, you know, but hardware side of things, and you take care of the field, and you particularly are in the security part, which is definitely something that was overshadowed by this whole IoT explosion. Nobody cared until it hit the fan.
Right.
And now it is hitting the fan on a daily basis.
Oh yeah.
And I do not agree with the fact that all the data is going to public. Case in point, every day we read about all of our data being stolen. AWS is not safe. Azure is not safe. And they do not even guarantee it. Read the fine lines. If you are a fool if you think you put your public data, and I was in HIPAA, I did
Well, the question is whether you can do better than them. I mean, they may not be secure, but I'm probably even less secure.
Well, the point that I'm trying to make is that the notion of security is the responsibility of the entity that creates the data.
Yes, that's true.
And I don't think that the security should be after the fact thought. It should be an initial fact thought. And I think your 24/7 support is important, not just for security, but when you sell something, you've got to support the damn thing or you won't survive. So there are these things that just I am like engulfed in, and they are all valuable and very important, but it's very fascinating how we develop our own picture in our own minds. And I respect all the opinions, by the way, because there is no one opinion that is 100%. Zero. But I learned from the security guy, and I learned from your hardware manufacturing activities that things that I did not see, right? I come from platform architecture. By the way, the definition of platform is simply putting a layer, as you put it, an abstraction, that can hide heterogeneity, meaning if I want to go from Azure to AWS, I can do so. That is it.
Mm.
That is it. You want to buy the app, go buy a refrigerator. You know, a physical thing. You don't have to worry about the API or platform. But you want to write something for Samsung, use the platform. That's it. So it unlocks it. And I come from standards, Unix world. And everybody poo-pooed it. You guys may not remember, but there was a company called DEC. I called it a fish oil. 3 years later, the guy Olson was gone. So I've seen these sort of things. And it is exciting. And I read everything you guys are saying. I may agree in some and disagree in the others, but that's the fact. Thank you.
Okay, so it's top of the hour. We want to think about our next event. Was this good? Was it all right? Yeah? Content all right?
Good.
Okay. So we want some ideas on what to cover next time. And keep it general like we did this time, or drill down into security or blockchain or payment systems or data structures and AI or whatnot. If you guys have any recommendations, please let me know. Because it is top of the hour and some people need to run, let's thank our panel. Thank you so much. Thank you for